We greatly appreciate the significance of lands, waters, and all living things, and offer our gratitude to the Indigenous people for their care and teachings about our earth. Our relationships with Indigenous communities are important, and we will continue to listen and to learn how we can be in good relationships with Indigenous peoples, lands and waters, and all living things, and act accordingly. The Invasive Species Center respectfully acknowledges that our head office is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Batchewana and Garden River First Nations, as well as the longtime settlement of the Métis people in the Robertson-Huron Treaty area. And with that, it's my pleasure to welcome Sue Chiblow, who's going to give our opening prayer today. Sue, I do have a tobacco offering for you, albeit virtual. We'll send one along. I know you're not very far away from us. Sue is an assistant professor at the University of Guelph and an Invasive Species Center board member. We're very happy to have you with us here this morning, and you can take it away, Sue.
All right, thank you. Ani bojo Sue Chiblow dishnikaz ogama nag minwa wasnode kwe indigo jajak dodam ketagonzi being dunjba ketagonzi being indogam Anishinaabe kwe endao. So miigwech, again, thank you for that warm welcoming, and I'd like to welcome everybody to this important event. Before I start that, I'm going to say a prayer since I've been offered sema, which is the tobacco. So giti miigwech jimdado minwa jakama kwe nigwech midam kino gigo ga mishieng kino gigo ga mishieng miigwech wenda mishum sak gokum sak gis nibishkode nokum gizes anag noden nimki minwa mijibishu giti miigwech dam mishian mandasa amedzbin minwa niswin miigwech wabanong manado jawanong manado nigabu madado minwa giwan manado giti miigwech kina gigo ga mishieng. So what I did there was I thanked the Creator, Jacques Makwe, the earth, and for everything that they provide for us. And I also thanked the grandfathers, the grandmothers, the sun, grandmother moon, water, fire, the stars, the winds, the thunder beings, and of course those spirits that live inside the waters. And again, I'm grateful for everything that they provide to us. And I also acknowledge the spirits in all of those four directions, the east, the south, the west, the north, and thank them for everything that they provided for us. So today is a beautiful day. I don't know where everybody's located, but I'm on the traditional territories of my ancestors. I'm actually living on the same lands that my four people lived on since 1850, since the reserve was established with the signing of the treaty. And in my area, I can see the waters, the St. Mary's River, which has changed dramatically since I was a child. And the different species that now live in this area that are either contributing harmfully or in other ways that have come to this territory. So I acknowledge all of those species that have come to these lands and wonder how we can work together with them. Instead of trying to control them and manage them, thinking about what is their responsibilities, what are they doing to these lands, and how do we work with them within their responsibilities. So when I think about invasive species, that's what I think about is what is their purpose? What is their responsibility? And is there a way that we can work with them? So I challenge everybody to think about that as opposed to controlling, because in the Anishinaabe worldview, we believe we are part of the cycle. We are part of the ecosystem. We are not above it. We are not below it. We are not outside of it. We are part of that system, and everything has a responsibility. So in terms of thinking about invasive species, how do we manage our responsibilities with their responsibilities to ensure that we have the safe lands, the waters, the sky world, and everything for those future generations that are yet to come? Oh, miigwech.
Thank you so much, Sue. Okay. Next, it's my pleasure to welcome another special guest of the morning, the Ontario Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry, the Honourable Graydon Smith.
Well, thank you very much, Mackenzie, and good morning, everyone. And thank you to Sue and Sarah. Good morning to you as well. I'm Graydon Smith, Ontario's Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry. I just want to reflect for a moment on an event we had at Queen's Park a few months ago surrounding invasive species, and members of the Invasive Species Centre were there, and lots of other partners that are doing great things in Ontario. And it was a great evening. I had a lamprey stuck to my hand for the first time. I'm happy to report the nightmares are just starting to end now from that event. But it was a great event, but the lamprey on the hand, it was, as I'll tell you, my greatest fear as a kid, I think, was having one of those things anywhere near me. So I guess I overcame something a little bit that evening. But it certainly was an evening that helped me appreciate even more the amount of collaboration and work that gets done on invasive species in Ontario. And I'm thankful that MNRF and ISC have that relationship and others that allow us to work together to protect Ontario's biodiversity, which includes protecting our lands and waterways from invasive species. We know Ontario is one of the most biodiverse provinces in Canada, with more than 30,000 species and multiple ecoregions, from the Carolinian forest in the south to the tundra in the northern Hudson Bay lowlands. But unfortunately, invasive species are one of the leading biodiversity loss causes in Ontario. They threaten our economy and our way of life, costing us $3.6 billion per year. And they impact a diverse collection of industries such as agriculture, fisheries, forestry, recreation, tourism, and even healthcare. I think the theme of this year's forum, Invasive Species Action in a Changing Climate, is really timely. We're seeing transformative changes to our natural environment through climate change that's increasing Ontario's susceptibility to the spread of invasive species. Our lakes and rivers are warming, which increases the amount of habitat that is suitable for aquatic invasive species. And warming waters are making Ontario's freshwater ecosystems vulnerable to new introductions and spread. Climate change is impacting Ontario's forests by making them more susceptible to the introduction and spread of invasive plants, insect pests, pathogens, and diseases. And that is why invasive species awareness and control is such an important part of the work that my ministry does. MNRF is on the front lines of managing invasive species and has made significant strides to prevent, detect, and respond to the threat of invasives. This includes ongoing development, implementation, and enforcement of the Invasive Species Act. It also means controlling high-risk species such as the water soldier and European water chestnut, and important public outreach and education initiatives. But dealing with invasive species requires all parts of society to get involved, and that includes awareness and support from everyday Ontarians. And I'm thankful that when people identify a problem, they're speaking up. I think one of the greatest successes we can point to in Ontario has been with wild pigs. People seem to be obsessed with these guys. Whenever there's a sighting in the Toronto area, it's pretty much national news. So when there was a sounder spotted in Pickering just over a year ago, MNRF officials worked hard to find and eliminate these invasives. And what helped us do that was receiving tips from the public that helped lead staff to the pigs. The public's become increasingly aware over the past few years that of the potential damages that wild pigs can bring to an ecosystem, and because of this, they've stepped up and reported sightings. Last year, ministry staff investigated sightings at 35 locations across southern Ontario. These site visits are effective public education and awareness opportunities, and they resulted in improved pig containment and the successful removal of 16 invasive wild pigs from the natural environment. The ministry's been working hard to understand how many wild pigs are in Ontario, and we're taking decisive action to prevent their establishment. We've seen that tackling invasive species is not something that MNRF can do by itself. It requires us to be connected to key partners and allies across the province. And by working together and sharing our knowledge and resources, we can strengthen our mutual efforts to fight to safeguard Ontario from this threat. The fight against Phragmites, for instance, has involved participation from all levels of government, academia, and more than 25 conservation organizations. And through our ongoing partnership with the Invasive Species Center, we've supported the efforts of the Green Shovels Collaborative, which includes leaders in conservation like Nature Conservancy Canada and Ducks Unlimited Canada. These partners are developing a strategic framework for the management of Phragmites in Ontario and supporting efforts to advance the use of new technologies such as biological control in the management of Phragmites and other invasive species. Given Phragmites' rapid spread across the province, the government recognizes that new innovative management tools are vitally needed to protect Ontario's biodiversity and economy. And we're proud to be making investments in the Green Shovels program and are optimistic that this work will help turn the tide against this costly invasive plan. That is why my ministry will continue to collaborate with partners who can help us identify and prioritize high-risk invasive species for regulatory consideration that are within the ministry's mandate and jurisdiction. In recent years, my ministry has taken a number of actions to help stop the spread of invasives in Ontario. We've collaborated with partners, including the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters and Parks Canada, to eradicate water soldier in the Trent Severn Waterway. The ministry's recently expanded efforts to address new occurrences of water soldier in the Bay of Quinte and is building new partnerships with members of the Bay of Quinte Restoration Council to monitor and develop a management plan for this high-risk threat. We work on policy and program development related to forest health issues, including insects, diseases, and factors such as climate change. And at the beginning of 2022, my ministry established 4 bait management zones and put rules in place restricting the transportation of bait fish or leeches, whether live or dead, into or out of a zone with some limited exceptions. We know there's always new threats of invasives that may pose challenges here in Ontario, and we are ready to work with you to face those species head on to protect Ontario's biodiversity and our economy too. By investing now to prevent and manage invasive species, we're protecting our natural resources, mitigating damage to our economy, and preventing having to spend much more public money down the road. So I'd like to assure you my ministry will continue to prioritize preventing the introduction and establishment of new invasive species in Ontario to avoid further ecological and economic harm in our province, while seeking ways to effectively reduce the impacts of those already established. Again, I want to thank you for listening to me today. Thanks to the Invasive Species Center for the opportunity to speak with all of you. I hope you have a great time, share lots of wonderful knowledge, and have a really productive forum. So thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Minister Smith, for your time today and for the ministry's ongoing support of all the great work in Ontario. Thanks again for being here. With that, I'm going to pass it over to our fearless Invasive Species Center leader, Sarah Rang, for her welcoming remarks for the forum.
Thanks very much, Mackenzie, and thank you, Sue, for the welcoming opening, and Minister Smith for his encouraging remarks as well. And thanks to you for joining with us for the annual Invasive Species Center Forum. This year, the theme is Invasive Species Action in a Changing Climate. So really looking forward to hearing from all our speakers today. My name is Sarah Rang. I'm the Executive Director of the Invasive Species Center. And just wanted to take the opportunity to thank Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry for their ongoing support of the center, but also this event today. It really has made it possible. We're delighted to have a record participation of over 900 folks who will be joining us over the 3 days. So big welcome to everybody online. Just in case you're not familiar with Invasive Species Center, we are a nonprofit organization headquartered in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Our mission is to help prevent the introduction and spread of invasive species in the lands and waters of Canada. We do this really in partnership with many different organizations. We're pleased to partner with over 200 different organizations each year. So one of the things that we work on is really, we divide our work into kind of 3 baskets. The first one is catalyzing action. The second one is sharing knowledge. And the third one really is building a business case for investment in invasive species management. So just a few highlights from this year from the work of the Invasive Species Center and the partners. Can't emphasize enough that it really is a partnership kind of approach. So this year we're delighted to continue to offer our microgrant program. These are small, modest grants that go to community groups to help them understand and manage invasive species on the ground. So we will be opening the microgrant call for proposals this spring, so encourage you to consider applying as an organization yourself or spreading the news to other organizations in your communities. In the past, we've funded over 100 different organizations to do practical on-the-ground actions. We'll also be working with many partners in our Green Shovels collaboratives to work on the Phragmites Control Fund as well. So that will also help drive some local action on Phragmites. In terms of sharing knowledge, the invasive species host events such as this one. We've also launched a new training program this year, so please consider joining in there. It's designed to provide online information, kind of a deep dive on some of our new emerging forest invasives, as well as some of the other invasive species. So that's available to you. We are working on a couple of new ones on spotted lanternfly, which is a new invasive that is a big threat to sort of our wine and hop industry as well. We've trained over 9,000 community members to recognize, identify, map invasive species in collaboration with a large number of different partners. And we're continuing to try to find new ways to tell the invasive species story in a compelling way to a very broad audience. So I'd just like to invite you to consider joining in the Invasive Species Awareness Week, which this year is happening from February the 20th to the 26th. If it's of interest to you, there's some free resources on the Invasive Species Center website. You can take them and adapt them and post them in your own networks, but it helps us spread the story of invasive species, which helps us all. Working on the third area is building the business case for investment in invasive species. And as Minister Smith noted, we have worked to quantify the cost of invasive species management in Ontario, which is a $3.6 billion annual impact of invasive species on our forestry industry, on our fisheries, our lakes, but also recreation and tourism, and even spreading over to infrastructure. So we're always looking for new partners and projects, and please don't hesitate to approach any of the invasive species team that you see at the forum. We're always interested in discussing new ideas and trying to find new ways to support different groups. With your help, we've really made great strides forward this year, and we continue to look forward to learning some new things through the forum over the next 3 days. So please join with us as we present to you over 50 speakers, and delighted that we have such great attendance. Thanks to you for your participation, your partnership, and your dedication as well to invasive species management. I wish you a productive few days at the forum, and please let us know if you have any questions. Pass it back to you, Mackenzie. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sarah. And big thanks to Sue and Minister Smith for joining us this morning as well. I just have a few housekeeping items to go over before we jump into our first session today. We are going to get started right at 9 a.m. So I might give you a 5-minute break to hit the washroom or grab a coffee before we jump into session 1. So just for housekeeping items, if you could please use the Q&A feature for any questions, and then the moderator of each session will walk speakers through the questions at the end of each presentation. We will be monitoring the chat in the background for any technical issues. So if you're having any problems there, you can pop them into the chat and somebody will get to you as soon as possible to help you out with any technical problems. If you are having poor connection issues with the audio, you can phone in by clicking the up arrow next to audio settings and selecting switch to phone audio. So you can switch to your phone if you're having audio connection issues. You can also refer to the attendee guide that was distributed to registrants via email to address any frequently asked questions that you may be having. We'll also have keynote sessions each day this week at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So please join us there. We've got some really exciting speakers lined up. We'll also be distributing a brief survey after the forum. Your feedback is really valuable and really helps us to provide improvements to our event every year. So we take that feedback to heart and we utilize it every year to try to make this forum better. So one more thing that we have actually added this year, please join us tomorrow at 11:50 a.m. for our first networking session, where you can connect with other people in your field. We'll have several different tables set up that you can join based on your topic of interest. So you can head on over to the Expo tab that you can find at the top right of the lobby screen and check out those tables. You can check out the booths at any time and join the networking sessions tomorrow over our lunch break. There are also several resources that you can access at any time in any of the booths, and then join that roundtable discussion to share some information and some of your experiences with others. So with that, we have about 7 minutes until 9. So I'll give you a quick break and we'll regather here at 9 a.m. so we can keep on schedule for people just joining in for 1 or 2 talks. So we'll see you back in about 7 minutes. Thanks for joining us this morning. Okay, everyone, welcome back. It's 8:59 and I think we're just about ready to get started. I'll give everyone another 30 seconds or so just to trickle back to their desks. Okay, 9 a.m. Let's get started. So welcome to session one. Today we're going to be talking a lot about aquatic invasive species. This first session is on outreach, communication, and community science. And I'm happy to introduce our moderator for this morning, Liana. Liana is an ISC program development intern. She's going to take us through the morning. She loves incorporating her experience as an angler into her work on aquatic invasive species outreach. And she's going to take us through this great lineup of speakers to talk about their work on aquatic invasive species communications. So I will see you all back at the week. And Liana, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thanks for that, Mackenzie. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Hoping you can all see it. Okay, thanks again, Mackenzie, for that introduction. And like she said, we're kicking off the morning with a session on aquatic invasive species, focusing on outreach, communication, and community science. As Mackenzie mentioned, a brief question and answer period will be held at the end of the presentation. So you can go ahead and drop your questions into the Q&A box, and I'll be happy to read them to our speaker after their presentation. And with that, I would like to welcome our first speaker, Brook Schryer from Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters.
Good morning. I'll share my screen here. Yeah, thank you, Liana, and thank you to the Invasive Species Center for inviting me to present. So I am Brook Schryer. I am the Assistant Coordinator with the Invading Species Awareness Program. And the Invading Species Awareness Program is out of the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters, which is located in Peterborough, Ontario. And today I'm here to chat about our program, which we started back in 2021, which was, and the title of my talk is Engaging Ontario's Public Through our Water Steward Program to Prevent the Spread of Aquatic Invasive Species. As we all know, in the invasive species world, boaters and anglers, and honestly anybody who utilizes watercrafts represent a significant threat towards spreading aquatic invasive species, be they invertebrates, aquatic plants, or maybe even fishes. And so in my role within the ISAP, I've been here for about 8 years now, and I've worked on a variety of projects. For example, I kind of spearhead the early detection and distribution mapping system for Ontario. So the way that the public of Ontario can report invasive species via the invading species hotline or edmaps.org. And then I'm also in charge of a variety of other profiles that we deal with, such as invasive carps or Asian carps, depending on where you find yourself geographically. I also run a variety of citizen science programs, whether it's a removal and management program for mystery snails in Haliburton County, which has removed over 680,000 mystery snails to date. And then I also spearhead another citizen science program, the Wild Pig Surveillance Program, which sees 50 trail cameras that are deployed on Ontario's landscape. This year, it's going to be in Northern Ontario, looking for any possible pesky wild pigs that may wander across into Ontario. And, just to kind of add on to what the minister was talking about in terms of wild pigs, we're also trying to assist the MNRF in any form of early detection for those invasive species. So the agenda for today's chat, you can see it here. So I'm just going to really briefly go over who we are and some of the project background, kind of the motivation, rationalization for why we started the program, and then just kind of going to get into the nitty gritty of the program itself, and then going to end with hopefully a Q&A. So who is the Invading Species Awareness Program? So before I get into that, who is the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters? So we are the largest not-for-profit fish and wildlife conservation organization in Ontario. We have 100,000 members, subscribers, and supporters with 725 member clubs. And we've been around for almost 100 years now. And we truly try to represent the voice of anglers and hunters and trappers in the province. And back in 1992, in a partnership with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, the OFAH founded the Invading Species Awareness Program. So that was, 31 years ago now. So we've been working on invasive species for that length of time. And our primary goal as a program has always been to generate education and awareness, really trying to elevate the various profiles of invasive species in Ontario so that Ontarians can, better understand the sorts of impacts that can be associated with invasive species, and then also understand the pathways or the vectors of spread and how they can, on their day-to-day, help prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species as well as terrestrial invasive species. Whether it's garlic mustard in your garden or round goby in the waterway, these are all types of species that we're trying to help prevent through spreading that education and awareness. Beyond that, you heard me mention the early detection and distribution mapping system, and that goes into our next point here, which is facilitating monitoring and early detection. Whether it's, edmaps.org and reporting via there, or the invading species hotline, 1-800-563-7711. We manage the invading species hotline, and we receive approximately 1,000 to 1,300 calls every year for invasive species reporting, as well as just people looking for information on invasive species. So in that, we have a variety of protocols that try to assist in, making sure that we are aware of what's coming in the province, what may show up in the province, so that we can communicate that to partners. And then finally, we support surveillance, control, and response. Through EdMaps, obviously, we're surveying Ontario for invasive species, but then in terms of control and response, things like Water Soldier that you heard the minister mention, we've been working on Water Soldier since basically 2008, so a number of years now, as well as Asian carps or invasive carps. We also, in terms of the hotline, we have a partnership with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to ensure that any reports of Asian carps or invasive carps are getting to federal partners. In terms of targeted outreach, as a program, what we're really focusing on, as I said, are those pathways and those vectors. And whether you're an ATVer or a trail hiker or an angler, horticulturalist, waterfowl hunter, boater, it doesn't matter. Unfortunately, if you're on the landscape, there is a possibility that you are spreading terrestrial or aquatic invasive species. It can really be as simple as seeds hiding in your dog's fur after going for a swim near Phragmites or what have you. So what we always try to do as a program is focus on those users and focus on those pathways and really try to drive home the message around trying to prevent the spread of these various species. So a bit of background in Ontario. So Ontario has over 400,000 lakes. That is a lot of water bodies, with over 100,000 kilometers or 62,000 miles, for those in the US who are listening, of rivers. That's a lot of water to cover. So obviously when there's that much water to cover and that much opportunity for aquatic invasive species to invade, it is vitally important that we prioritize education and outreach, right? Because at the end of the day, when something is established in a water body, it is almost impossible, depending on when you catch it, to eradicate it. So it is so vitally important that we prevent the spread and prevent the introduction of species in the first place. So that is why, as a program and in partnership with various other groups in Ontario, like the Invasive Species Center, we've always tried to really push that education outreach, piece. Today in Ontario, there are over 185 non-Indigenous aquatic species in the Great Lakes Basin. Now, not all of those are invasive, but just gives you an idea of how many non-Indigenous species are in our waters today, and then not to mention what's inland in Southern Ontario and the rest of Ontario. And then we have over 400 terrestrial invasive species. So it gives you an idea, we are the most heavily invaded province in Canada, and there's a variety of reasons for that. But what we really try to do is try to elevate those profiles again, so that people understand what to look for and what to report. Now, we all know, if you're attending this, you already know, but in case you don't, AIS have significant negative impacts on fish and wildlife, the natural beauty of our waterways, the recreation, the enjoyment of property, our economy, and then sometimes even human health. Something like Water Soldier with its serrated leaves can cut you up, can cut your hands. So that, in that case, is a risk to human health. And some of the images you can see here, that first image is actually zebra mussels attached to a banded mystery snail, which are two, invasive aquatic species that we have in Ontario. And in the bottom photo, you have a representation of what a trailer might look like when it's coming out of the water, and was really the motivation for starting our program, the Water Steward program. So the overall goal of this program is to engage boaters and anglers to prevent the spread of AIS in Ontario. So we were fortunate enough to receive some funding through the Ontario Trillium Foundation. and this was in 2021. And the area where our project really covers is, you can see in the map there, is basically the area that's 15. So that yellow region, that's where our efforts fall under the Ontario Trillium Foundation. And you can see some of our volunteers there in the bottom image, engaging with anglers who are probably coming off the water. And, again, it's really focused in that Durham, Haliburton, Kawartha, Pine Ridge regions, and focused on the prevention of movement of aquatic invasive species through just talking to boaters and to anglers, and just letting them know that there are various species that they need to be on the lookout for, as well as the fact that there are new regulations in Ontario that came into effect as of January 1st, 2022, that they need to be aware of. It is now a requirement that they at least clean and drain their watercrafts when coming off the water. So that's a visual inspection, removing any potential weeds or other, algae or things like that, as well as making sure that any standing water in their vessel is being drained to the best of their ability. So we started this program and we said, okay, well, we want to recruit volunteers. We want, people to kind of, who have an inherent interest in the protection of our aquatic ecosystems, to be out there to communicate with members of their community, to let them know that this is a severe issue. And, we can't be everywhere. We are a small team, and obviously the Invasive Species Center can't be everywhere. Again, there's 400,000 lakes in Ontario. So we wanted to kind of, try to divide and conquer by training the trainer of sorts. So making sure that, individuals who are coming in are getting trained as volunteers so that they know what messages to communicate to boaters and anglers, so that when they're out on or at the boat launch, they can, relay that information. So one of the first things we did was we generated an Aquatic Invasive Species Water Steward handbook that goes over all the things that you see here, what it means to be a volunteer, what are the key messages that you want to relay, obviously safety and equipment, which, was so vital, especially, we're all kind of recovering or continuing to experience COVID. And so that was, one of the primary concerns at the time, because you would be interacting with people, as well as what it means to perform an AIS check, the important AIS to look out for, especially in Southern Ontario, and then resources and questions. So like an FAQ style portion for the book. So because obviously anglers always have questions, or boaters have questions. So we want to make sure that the volunteers are kind of well-versed on some of those most popular questions. Then we jump into our postcard and training video. So we developed a really handy, just catch-all postcard, which kind of goes over the regulations, goes over what it means to do clean, drain, dry, and as well as ways to find additional resources or even report invasive species. So it's a little, 4x6 postcard that we've been handing out. I know ISC was recently at the Toronto Boat Show. Unfortunately, we were unable to attend this year, but they had many of these in hand, and we're passing them out to boaters in Ontario, which is fantastic. And then another thing that we generated, which was actually the Water Steward Program YouTube video. So it's a really well done YouTube video on how to be, or what it means to be a volunteer, how to do an AIS check, how to use the tools that are in your kit to do a proper AIS check, to ensure that, boaters, once they see you do it, will know how to do that check themselves moving forward. So then we got into volunteer recruitment, and we worked with partners such as the Federation of Ontario's Cottagers Association, which I believe you'll be hearing from next. We also worked with Competitive Sports Fishing League, so CSFL, to really try to get the word out there to various, lake associations and cottage associations to say, hey, we're searching for volunteers who would like to come forward and, maybe spend a day here and there engaging with boaters, and we provide you with all the resources, the t-shirts, the canopies and things like that to the best of our ability so that you can engage with boaters. We also use social media, as we always do, with a call to action on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we actually had, over the last 2 years, 60 volunteer responses. Year one in 2021 was a little bit slower. Obviously, it was our pilot year, and it was tough to get that recruitment, especially with COVID. But now we're doing much better. And as you can see here, we have volunteer responses from a variety of locations and partners. Which we
Brooke, you got about 2 minutes left.
Thank you. So then what are the types of, events that we went to? We went to competitive angling tournaments. We approached lake associations. We went to specific boat launches, strategic boat launches where there's, more activity. And then we also took part in the regional AIS landing blitz. And, it'd be remiss of me to omit this. The regional AIS landing blitz is actually what motivated us to spearhead this program. We saw our partners all across the states doing amazing work, going to boat launches, engaging with boaters. So we decided, hey, let's start this program and try to add on to that. So that was one of the main motivations. we just boosted stuff on social media. We got the posts out there. We said, come and join us, come and chat with us, you know, or like I said, our call to action to recruit people to actually be volunteers. So in summary, from 2021 to 2022, you know, we accumulated about 60 volunteers. We had 7 training sessions where we trained the volunteers. We had about 41,000 impressions on social media, 154 hours logged from volunteers. And, you know, just some amazing numbers, 1,300 boaters and anglers engaged and 35 engagement events. These people are dedicating their time to come out on a Saturday or a Sunday to talk about invasive species. That is beyond admirable, and I commend them on that work. And hopefully this year we can take it to the next level. So really quickly, what are some of the challenges we experienced? Having a volunteer go from learning to doing, right? It's one thing to come in and get educated and get trained, but then to actually get them out on the landscape is quite challenging. We also wanted to maintain engagement with volunteers despite bi-monthly virtual meetings. You know, in the winter, it's a little bit harder to talk about the boating season and the angling season because obviously, you know, we got ice on our water. So it's always a challenge to maintain that communication. And then obviously when we're at the boat launches, non-English speakers or English as a second language. And that's something that we're really delving into now, trying to develop resources that will, you know, incorporate a variety of languages like simplified traditional Chinese and Urdu, which is the primary language of Pakistan, as well as Punjabi, and then French, obviously. So we're looking into that. And then the next steps is approaching volunteer recruitment through lake associations. That's where we had the greatest success. And we also want to offer incentives to young professionals or students to volunteer, maybe volunteer hours in high school. And then we also, I'm very happy to say we have new staff, new direction, and new opportunities. We have brought on Jeff Berthollet, who is our new ISAP outreach liaison, and he can be contacted via that email there if you'd like to, you know, let us know of an event, maybe in that catchment where you'd like us to come and help. Or even just, you know, want to volunteer, you can contact Jeff. And I also want to say thank you to Matthew Robbins, who is our former staff member, who's moved into another role in the OFAH, who really spearheaded this program. I had nothing to do with it. He did it. He did great work. He's the one who engaged with volunteers, and he was the one that was out there, you know, training them on the weekends. So with that, I want to say thank you. I want to thank you again to the Invasive Species Center for inviting me to chat. And also thank you to Sarah Rang and to the minister for their awesome words this morning.
Thank you for that presentation, Brooke. Now, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put it into the Q&A chat and I will read them to our speaker.
And I'm always available, guys, via telephone. There's my phone number there. You can contact me. My extension is 227. Otherwise, you can email me, brook_Schryer@ofh.org. I know in this type of forum, sometimes it's hard to come up with a question on the spot. But if you have any questions, you can give me a call or you can shoot me an email, and I'd be more than happy to discuss the program with you or even direct you to Jeff.
Great. And if anyone has any questions that trickle in after the presentation, feel free to leave them in the chat or the Q&A. And if Brooke is able to, he can stick around and answer those questions for you.
Yeah, certainly can.
I'll just give it another minute in case anyone has anything else to say, and then we will move on to our next speaker. Okay. Thanks again, Brooke, for joining us. With that, I would like to welcome our next speaker, Deanna Forgie from the Federation of Ontario Cottagers Association. Deanna.
Thanks. I'll just share my screen here and get everything going. Okay. All right, is everyone seeing that there? Okay. My camera going here. Okay, here we go. So thank you so much to the ISC for having me. As they said, my name is Deanna Forgie, and I'm the programs coordinator with the Federation of Ontario Cottagers Associations, or FOCA for short. Today, I'm going to highlight some of FOCA's efforts throughout the years to engage the boating public and raise awareness on the importance of clean, drain, dry. So to start, who is FOCA? Well, FOCA represents the people who live at the waterfront in Ontario, whether seasonally or year-round. Our members are lake or road associations, some very small and some very large, and of course, every size in between. Waterfront property owners are a self-reliant and adaptable bunch. And despite the casual close and dockside meetings, these are dedicated and passionate people who are vested in the future and are intimately familiar with the resources, special attributes, and changes happening on our lakes and rivers. Some live on relatively undeveloped land in low density regions, and others live where lake capacity has already been reached or even exceeded. Ontario borders 4 of the 5 Great Lakes and is blessed with over 250,000 named inland lakes that all need our care and attention. For years, FOCA has advised visitors and residents of waterfront communities to take steps to prevent the spread of invasive species in cottage country, including gardening using only non-invasive plants, disposing of bait properly, buying firewood locally, and of course to inspect and clean your boat and motor when changing water bodies. The border pathway has been identified as the single greatest avenue for undesirable and harmful species to make their way from lake to lake. And despite many years of ongoing outreach and education by FOCA and others, the movement of boats continues to be a major threat. So FOCA has been working with its members for several years to educate them and their own members about aquatic invasive species, or AIS, with a focus on the clean, drain, dry messaging. And while FOCA's community have been some of the loudest activists with regards to the clean, drain, dry messaging, they're also one of the largest potential vectors. Therefore, it's critical to keep this audience engaged and educated about the threat aquatic invasive species pose to their local ecosystem and how they can prevent their spread. So during this session, we'll describe some of the efforts previously and currently underway by FOCA and our member associations to reach out to the boating public and raise the commitment of all boaters to engage in clean, drain, dry practices. So from 2016 to 2018, FOCA ran an aquatic invasive species program, which is an initiative that was made possible through a transfer payment agreement with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. Through this program, FOCA worked to support the Ontario government's commitments in the implementation of the Ontario Invasive Strategic Plan and the Invasive Species Act. The scope of the project was to promote the provincial best management practices with our members across Ontario, aimed at reducing the risk of spreading invasive species in the province, primarily through the movement of watercraft. This exciting program was broken down into 2 parts, those being outreach and education and association projects. So I'll go over some outreach and education activities. So during this program, FOCA implemented a provincial radio PSA campaign to promote best management practices to reduce the spread or introduction of AIS from the recreational boating pathway. The PSA was played during the Cottage Country traffic reports, which aired on over 20 radio stations for a total of 502 spots. FOCA also used cottager-focused ads from the MNRF that were included in our print and digital media. And FOCA also obtained invasion on postcards from the ministry to distribute to members across Ontario. So in partnership with the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters, FOCA assisted in the creation of a clean, drain, dry sign. Several hundred of these copies of this sign have been distributed to associations across Ontario for posting at boat launches since 2016. And this sign has also more recently been updated to include wording explaining it is now the law. So volunteers also distributed hundreds of these bright orange aquatic invasive species t-shirts to members and volunteers at waterfront events across Ontario. And here you can see a few lovely pictures of the signs going up at boat launches across the province. So through this aquatic invasive species program, FOCA also sought participation from our member associations to run projects aimed at addressing aquatic invasive species at the local level. The projects focused on education and outreach or invasive species control, management, and eradication. Since 2016, nearly 60 associations completed a wide range of projects. And through our contract with the MNRF, FOCA funded these projects with grants or provided expert advice and resources. So now I'll go over a few specific examples of FOCA members who completed projects aimed at addressing the boater pathway in their own communities. So some associations felt that they needed to educate their community about the potential impacts aquatic invasives could have on their lake and what they should be doing to prevent their introduction and spread. Project participants held invasive species seminars, distributed invasive species awareness t-shirts, or put up signage warning boaters to clean, drain, and dry their boat before moving to different bodies of water. In particular, the Scugog Lake Stewards worked with FOCA to design an aquatic invasive species sign that is specific to their community. And the association knew how busy their local boat launch was on any given weekend in the summer, and therefore they felt they needed to be educating boaters before they launched their boat. So the sign has been educating boaters from the community and all over the Greater Toronto area who visit their lake. Community boat wash stations are also a great solution for preventing the spread of invasive species. It provides boaters with the tools they need to easily clean their boat prior to entering the lake and before leaving. The Lake St. Peter Property Owners Association, located in Hastings Highlands, applied to participate in FOCA's AIS program to prevent the spread of invasive species through the Lake St. Peter Provincial Park Access Point. The annual count of vehicles visiting the provincial park is estimated to be over 12,000 annually, so this provides lots of opportunity for AIS to be introduced to the lake. The association applied for funding to purchase a power washer, which would allow people to clean their boats before entering the lake. And the association sought and received their approval of the provincial park management team to install the power washer at the park entrance for use by visitors bringing watercraft into the park. A clean, drain, dry sign to remind visitors that they should be cleaning their boats was also installed at the park entrance. And in addition to this, the association also made literature available within the park's office to educate all campers about AIS. So this wash station was installed in 2018, and it has been used by many campers and visitors since. And you can see it in action in the picture on the screen. They're happy to report that the installation of the washer at the park actually resulted in a member who operates a private business on the lake to decide that they'd also be installing a wash station at their own access point. So this was a very successful project that focused on AIS prevention and education. And my next example is from the Tea Lake Property Owners Association, which is located in the township of Severn. They applied to participate in FOCA's AIS program to establish a baseline profile of the lake so they could understand current conditions and find out if any AIS were already present. So FOCA provided the association with two biologists who conducted a lake-wide survey of existing aquatic species to identify the native plants and see if any AIS were present. The results of their survey indicated that the lake did in fact contain Eurasian water milfoil, and the association also learned about the beneficial native species that are useful in competing with the invasive plants. The team spent a day with the association reviewing their initial observations and identified various methods of how the invasive species propagates and various control methods. They subsequently produced a report with full details of the lake plant profile. Since receiving the report, the association has shared it with their members. They've posted it to their website, and their lake steward also plans to incorporate the information into any new initiatives they do in the future. The association has reported to FOCA that they felt as their education activities roll out, they will continue to influence more people and improve stewardship habits around their lake. They also reported has dispelled any misinformation and myths about the lake weed population and more appropriate ways to address it. So this was a very successful project that focused on investigation, outreach, and education, and just proves that the more you educate and engage people in what's going on in their environment, the more likely they are to commit to environmental practices such as clean, drain, dry. So now to move on to a bit of more recent programming. In 2021, FOCA helped launch the iSample On program with our colleagues at the Invasive Species Center, and we are pleased to be able to continue the program in 2022. And iSample, of course, stands for Invasive Species Awareness Monitoring Program and Lake Education in Ontario. So the intent of the program was to do targeted outreach, education, and sampling for invasive mussels and spiny water flea in lakes on the Canadian Shield. So this past year, 29 lakes were selected from within FOCA's membership, with over 50 volunteers representing those lakes. The volunteers collected 3 water samples and 1 eDNA sample from their lake and sent it back to the ISC lab for analysis. After that, volunteers were encouraged to post and share information about invasive species prevention in their community via posting clean, drain, dry signs, sharing articles, information, and of course, through other means, including their social media accounts. So we also encourage volunteers to get the next generation involved in their sampling and education efforts. And we'd once again like to thank the volunteers for their hard work and dedication to the program. And I'd also like to bring your attention to a quote from one of our volunteers. He said, "The reason we're protecting our lake is hope. We hope that future generations will be able to enjoy the beauty of nature as we seniors have. We hope that our grandchildren will be able to explore the shore and see frogs, turtles, snakes, and crayfish as we have been able. And we hope that future generations will be able to catch fish that are clean and healthy. We hope that our grandchildren will be able to swim in clean water. We hope that future generations will be able to canoe in the lake that is brimming with native plants, wildflowers, and insects. And hope is why we are so determined to protect our lake. And I think this quote is important to remember when we are trying to convince the public to engage in things such as clean, drain, dry practices. And finally, in 2022, this past year, FOCA worked to inform lake users of amendments to the Invasive Species Act and the new regulations and how they will help us prevent and slow the spread of invasive species. And we did this through our website, our various social media channels, newsletters, and a webinar that we held for our members back in March. We hope by sharing this information widely, we'll create more awareness and commitment from the public to engage in clean, drain, dry practices. And of course, if you're interested in obtaining any of these materials about this new regulation, please reach out to the FOCA office and we can assist you. So thanks for listening to my quick synopsis of FOCA's efforts to engage the boating public and raise awareness on the importance of clean, drain, dry over the past several years. I hope you found it informative and it has given you some ideas on the types of things you can do in your own communities. I do believe that through FOCA member associations, a significant amount of groundwork can be accomplished by the dedicated group of volunteers who care so much about the health of their lakes. And all these initiatives will have enduring benefits in their respective communities via local efforts and ongoing stewardship. So I'd like to thank the ISC for having me today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are some.
Thanks for your presentation, Deanna. We have a few questions coming in.
Alright.
First one is, how difficult was it to work during the pandemic with communities?
Yeah, it was tricky. So it was definitely more online resources, as you can tell. And usually with our lake associations, one of their strengths is they can organize community events and have everybody come together. But some of that was limited, and obviously social distancing factors needed to be considered. So yeah, a lot of it was more online resources. And, you know, if there were people out on the water doing stuff, it was in smaller teams and in their own boats. So there a little bit more coordination went around that for sure.
Great. And to go off that question, do you think things are picking back up a little bit and becoming easier now that some restrictions have eased up a bit?
I would say that for sure. I'd say within our membership that some online events have stuck and have become kind of more common practice, especially during the off season. But I'd say last year and this upcoming year in particular, we're seeing more return to normal in terms of summer events and gatherings and such like that.
Great. Another question, do you see an increase in clean, drain, dry material requests now that it has been updated in the Invasive Species Act?
Yes, definitely. So the new signs that I referenced that say it's now the law, I think we ordered a couple hundred and they're all gone. We had to do a reorder because people are wanting to get that updated information out there and inform people that it is now the law and there might be some repercussions for not doing it.
Great. And do you think that with it being the law now, do you think enforcement, since it's been about a year, do you think enforcement is going to increase and how is that going to help?
We certainly hope so. A lot of that is up to the MNRF, and it's up to us to get the messaging out there that there is enforceable actions. But yeah, that's what we hope, and we hope as it rolls on that there'll be more enforcement.
Awesome. Another question from the chat. Would you say that clean, drain, dry initiatives is more successful when people have access to tools like a pressure washer? And is it worthwhile for parks and conservation areas to provide access to one?
I'd say it definitely makes it easier because there is the drying your boat, I think, for 5 to 7 days in sunshine isn't always feasible for everybody. So having access to a pressure washer certainly could help. Brook might have some words on this because I know they did some in the past, some pilots with having pressure washer stations at different boating or fishing events. But yeah, definitely having the ease of it right there certainly helps as opposed to trusting that they'll go home and do it or that they'll remove things physically themselves.
Great. And another question to go with that one. Do you think encouraging people to use the washing station is difficult? Like, even though it is easy and it's accessible right there, is there limitations in actual use out of it?
For sure. So I think especially the first year of power washers there, it's advantageous to perhaps have a staff member monitoring it and having that education piece of why they should be doing it. Because yeah, if someone just sees it there with signage, maybe they're not likely to do it. But if you engage someone in a conversation and explain why it's important to be cleaning your boat, then it definitely would get more use. So I think the first year something's there, for sure, it would be helpful to have it staffed and especially on the busy weekends, have someone there explaining why it's a good thing to do.
Awesome. In terms of the cottager audience, is there anything special about the audience that you keep in mind while doing outreach?
Yeah, just that, as I mentioned, they are a group that are so passionate about protecting their lake. So sometimes it's kind of speaking to the converted already, but with the pandemic, we've seen a lot of new cottagers come in and new people moving in, that we need to be aware that they may not be aware of what's been happening in the lake or what an invasive species even is. So a lot of it is speaking to folks who perhaps might already know what's going on in terms of what invasive species are and the impacts they could have, but it's also reaching those new cottagers who might not be aware. So it's kind of targeting your materials to both audiences and making sure the message gets out there as widely as possible.
Awesome. Another question from the chat. The wash stations, this might be a comment if you want to comment on it. Says the wash stations are brilliant. Most people are decent and just need to know. Then bonus, you make it easy to clean up. Well done.
Exactly. Yep. Hit the nail on the head.
Awesome. Another question. Have they considered using a QR code that each cottage, and Airbnb properties could have in their welcome package for guests? This could enable multiple languages a bit easier. Yeah,
QR codes are a great idea and a great new tool. We do encourage, especially renters, to have welcome packages there that explain everything about the property and the lake, from the septic systems to native plants to what not to do with your garbage and what to do with your boat. So certainly having those welcome packages is a very useful tool. And yeah, QR codes are a new tool that we're starting to utilize, but we certainly could much more. And I think that would be very useful, especially with the different languages, as you said.
Awesome. And this kind of goes with that. Do you think that online outreach in that sense is becoming more popular than maybe years past?
Yeah. And yeah, especially with the pandemic and new cottagers and lots of people being on social media, we certainly try to utilize that as much as possible because you get a broader reach. It's certainly a lot easier to hit more people in a short amount of time.
Another question from the chat. Is there any partnerships with First Nation communities that are residing in and around lakes in Ontario?
Through FOCA specifically, I'm not too sure. I think maybe some of our member groups do have some partnerships going on, but through FOCA specifically, not at the moment.
Great, thanks. In terms of your in volunteer recruitment, what is your advice to encourage and increase volunteer recruitment?
Let's see here. Definitely going through lake associations. If you can reach out to lake associations, they have access to sometimes hundreds of people who live along the lake, and they're volunteers who are already vested in the future of their lake and want to protect it. So yeah, if you're looking to do things around lakes, definitely reach out to the lake associations because they have access to all those people.
Great. Now, in terms of clean, drain, dry and it coming back into, it being increased in the legislation, what do you think the next steps are to increase clean, drain, dry or watercraft as a pathway?
Yeah, it's just getting the word out there. I think working with more lake associations on the ground could be very helpful because they're talking to all those boaters and anglers, working with OFH certainly because they've got all the anglers out there. It's just increasing the messaging and making sure people are aware that it is now the law and there are repercussions for their actions.
Great. And I'll leave it out if anyone has any other questions. Again, if Deanna is able to, she can answer it either in the Q&A box or in the chat. And her email is also at the bottom of the screen if you'd like to record it. I had one more question come through.
Yeah.
Do we have a link to the law handy? If you could maybe drop it into the Q&A box or into the chat, a link to that legislation.
I can do that for sure.
Awesome. Great. Okay, and with that, thanks again, Deanna, for answering all those questions. It was really helpful to hear about that and your presentation. We did have one more question come through, so I'm going to answer it, or I'm going to read it out quickly.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity to include AIS info in the boater's license program, perhaps having a segment in the training dedicated to it?
That's a great idea. Yeah, I don't make those decisions, but I do really like that idea. And I think it's, especially for new boaters on the water, it's something that they should be aware of.
Great, that is a great idea. Okay, I'll let you go now. Thanks, Deanna, for everything.
So much.
And with that, I would like to pass it to our next speaker, Rebecca Durazio from the Invasive Species Center.
There we go. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for
having me on here to speak. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm just going to stop my video while I present so that I'm not too distracted. Okay, so this morning I wanted to chat a little bit about the use of some digital tools for grass carp awareness and prevention that we do at the Invasive Species Center. I'm sure you've heard this already this morning, but if you hopped on a little late, I work at the Invasive Species Center, which is a not-for-profit organization that connects stakeholders, knowledge, and technology to prevent the introduction and spread of invasive species that harm Canada's environment, economy, and society. So my presentation today, I just want to give a little bit of an overview of what we do specifically on this program that I'm going to chat with you about today, talk a bit about our target audiences, and then get into some of the tools that we use to reach that audience. So what we do, this is specific to the Asian Carp Canada program, which is a collaborative program, and we actually have about 9 groups from Ontario and 1 from Quebec, and we kind of convene and collaborate, discuss our individual organization's goals and our programming, and then talk about ways that we can work together to reach these shared goals, which is preventing Asian carps from establishing in the Canadian waters of the Great Lakes, and the Great Lakes as a whole, of course, but specifically because we're Canadian, our focus is Canadian waters. At the ISC, we focus a lot on education and outreach as a tool to prevent establishment in the Great Lakes. So some of those tools are through digital outreach. We have an exhibit at the Toronto Zoo with 3 of the 4 species. So if you're in the Toronto area, head to the zoo and you can check out the exhibit in the Indo-Malaya Pavilion. We have a website. We host some webinars annually, and we do information sessions once a year, just to name a few things. So a few years back, we've been working on this program since 2014, and a few years back, our partners at Fisheries and Oceans Canada hosted this gap analysis where we kind of analyzed all of our outreach and everything that we were putting out there in terms of our education outreach tools to see kind of like what we were doing well and what gaps we were missing. So this gap analysis identified that our target audience was anglers in the Great Lakes Basin. And while all of our information was hoping to reach anglers, it wasn't necessarily super specific to them. Anglers are the ones that are out on the water the most. They're probably the ones that are most likely to see, and this includes commercial anglers as well as recreational anglers, but they're most likely to see Asian carps if they're out on the water. So from this gap analysis, we really wanted to kind of hone in on that audience. And then from there, it was how do we reach them? And that's through influencer marketing, which is a huge thing these days. We can look to angling specific resources like forums, magazines, and newsletters. And then of course, there's social media. So influencer marketing, it was generally new to us at this point, and you've heard of it probably, and I'll use a terrible example with like the Kardashians or other celebrities, but I did not know that there was angling influencers out there that people followed in mass numbers. So we started working with them on social media, specifically with large followings, and we wanted them to kind of promote our call to action of learn to identify and report. So the first angler that we worked with, her name is Ashley Ray, and her handle is She Loves to Fish. At the time, she had about 90,000 followers between all of her platforms. That's grown, I think, to over 150,000 followers at this point. But this was kind of the first campaign we did with her. It was very general to Asian carps. And then this is the more recent one we've done, which was specific to grass carp. So a really great thing that she did for us was promote this awesome, oops, why did I go backwards? Awesome resource that was developed by the OFAH in partnership with some of the organizations from the Asian Carp Canada program, which goes into detail on how to identify and report grass carp. And like really specifically, you can compare it to other native lookalikes or non-native lookalikes. And it goes into really great detail about how to actually report it because DFO does want the fish with no damage to its head or eyes so that they can learn from it. So it's a really great resource, and it's something that we try and push as much as we can with our outreach. And then she posted DFO's grass carp video, which was awesome too. Then we worked with Taro Murata, who has about 80,000 followers. This campaign got us about 70,000 impressions across his YouTube and social media posts.
So the thing with working with influencers is it's very different from what we do on our own social media channels, because we kind of have our own tone and our own audiences. And just like the way that we post things is very specific to the ISC. So when we reach out to influencers, it's kind of how can we fit our messaging with your brand? Like, I don't want to make somebody who's really serious post something silly and vice versa. So Taro happens to be a very silly, funny person, and his kind of channel and all of his posts just fit that brand and they fit his personality. So we wanted to make it fit with that. So he did a really great YouTube video for us. We had a lot of people sending it to us and kind of saying like, oh my God, have you seen this? And we were like, actually, yeah, like we worked with him on it. So it was great. And then if you can see on the right here, he did this grass carp story on how to identify grass carp. And he did it to the tune of Whitney Houston's How Will I Know? So super funny. And it went over really well. And we're not going next. Okay, so then we worked with Paul Castellano. He goes by the handle of Cast Adventures, and he kind of has his own like fishing charter company where he takes people out on the water. So we worked with him and we did a lot of Instagram story stuff. So he did some like interactive things with his followers where people submitted their responses. So you can kind of see here on the right an example of that, and it'll probably flip through now. So it was more of like trivia, just getting his audience engaged was something that he really was interested in, not just posting information, but he wanted people to kind of comment and like be interested and actually engage with his content. So it was a really great campaign, and he doesn't have as large of a following as the other two, but overall it did quite well. Then we worked with Avery Rose. She is maybe 14 now, but at the time we worked with her, I think she was 13, maybe just going into high school. She has about 5,700 followers on YouTube and Instagram. And she also has her own TV show on Bell TV called Hooked, and it streams to over 8 million homes across North America. So we wanted to work with her for a couple years, and we finally got the opportunity to last summer. So she did like a little 1-minute PSA on one of her episodes of Hooked where she was actually fishing for common carp. So she got to go through all of the like features between common carp and grass carp and how to tell the difference and why you should report grass carp. And she included that in one of her episodes of Hooked, which streamed. Then she did a YouTube video where she was fishing for common carp. And we briefed her in the event that she did catch a grass carp on kind of where she should take the video, but she didn't end up catching one, thankfully. So again, it kind of had that just like comparison and how to tell the difference and what to do if you actually did catch a grass carp. And she posted about that on her YouTube or her Instagram as well. So that was a really great campaign. Then we worked with Jay Siemens. He has almost 90,000 subscribers on YouTube. So he did a PSA in one of his videos that got us about 22,000, almost 23,000 views. And he was just going walleye fishing. So he kind of took the spin on it that walleye would be impacted by a grass carp invasion. So that's what he talked about, which was really great. And then again, he pushed that fact sheet for us and how to ID and report. Then last winter, we worked with Gord Pizer, who has over 12,000 followers, and we did a 2-part feature in his blog on Outdoor Canada. So he interviewed me and posted this on his social media channel, and that went over really well as well. So those are just a few examples of some of the influencers that we worked with, and we're continuing to do so this year. We're going to work with Ashley Ray again, and we have another one in the works with Chris Johnston, who's a pretty popular tournament angler. So that will be out soon. If you guys want to follow us on social media, you'll definitely come across it. So some other targeted angler outreach we do, I mentioned earlier, is email marketing, working on angling websites, working with angling publications, and posting in forums. Again, this is really specific to anglers, so it's just another really easy way to reach that target audience. So the first kind of publication, I guess you could say, we worked with was Anglers Atlas. This is a newsletter that's sent to over 40,000 Ontario anglers, and they're a national organization, so they were able to kind of just keep the scope to Ontario for us. We put digital ads on their website and specific to the Great Lakes Canadian pages, and we did an email newsletter, which we'll probably scroll through, just taking a second. But yeah, we posted the video on how to identify grass carp from DFO, some diagrams, stuff about the impacts, what you can do, and how to report. Recently, we've been taking out ads in Just Fishing magazine, and we've been doing this in most of their issues. They have 4 a year, a spring, summer, fall, winter issue. So this summer and spring, we did a 2-page spread, which is kind of when we figure most anglers are out on the water and when you're most likely to run into a grass carp if you're going to. So we did more of a 2-page spread, which was specific to kind of breaking down that fact sheet a little bit. And yeah, we ran that in their magazine. And we've been doing that for a couple years, which has been great. We also took out some ads on Outdoor Canada magazine's angling web pages. I like to call it clickbait, which was an accidental pun I made once, and now I'm just running with it. So we don't give a ton of information on it, but it's kind of just like, have you seen a grass carp? No, what's a grass carp? So it encourages people to click and maybe piques their interest, and they'll go back to our website and learn a little bit more. So that's been good. And then we've been doing some work with fishhawk.net, which is a angling forum. Again, we have that little clickbait ad at the top. And then last year, we also ran a survey to talk to anglers about what they knew about Asian carps, but mostly for selfish purposes, I wanted to know where they like to get their information from so I could use that to my advantage, which we did last year. And a few of the influencers that we worked with last year were a result of that survey. So we're planning to do one again in the coming weeks. And in addition to these 2 ads, we also have a forum post that we've taken out on this webpage where we kind of update it with some grass carp information, and anglers can interact with it and we can chat with them. We also worked with Bluefish Canada last year. We did some PSAs on their podcast. The leader, or I guess founding member of this organization, actually produced some content in Braille, which was really cool to target the blind angling community. And then we did 2 videos that were produced and posted on social media and 1 email newsletter. And then this past year, we've worked with Fish in Canada, and we have a partnership with them. So we've done a podcast episode, and we'll be doing another one soon. And we have live read ads in their podcast, which are super interesting because if you're familiar with listening to podcasts, it's kind of basically like a commercial break, and you can just easily skip it because you'll know it's a commercial, it's pre-recorded, it's very obvious. But we do the live ad reads, so it kind of just flows with the conversation they're already having, and you might not necessarily know to skip. And they've told us that they're getting a lot of questions and responses to stuff like that. So the next podcast that we're doing, which actually was a great idea from our moderator today, Liana, is kind of like a Q&A. So we're going to have their audience send in questions, and we're going to answer them on the podcast. We also have an ad on their website, and we're doing 2 sponsored articles in their blog section, as well as some ads in their newsletter. And then this year again, a new partnership that we have is with FishBrain, which is the #1 fishing app in the world. It covers 1.7 million bodies of water, and they have catch data for over 2,800 species with a community of over 14 million anglers. It's basically Facebook for fishing. We have our own little brand page where we post content just like you would on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. We can tag it to specific bodies of water. So if someone's searching on Lake Erie for good fishing spots, our post might pop up on grass carp, and to be alert and aware and know how to identify and report. So yeah, it's been a really great partnership to have with them, starting this page, and we've been doing blog posts with them as well. So the last thing I wanted to touch on before I wrap up is social media. We've been doing social media since the beginning of our work on this program. And so we've been doing organic content and paid promotion on Facebook and Twitter, and Instagram as well is something new, and recently YouTube as well. So with paid promotion, we're able to target anglers and specific locations, but these aren't necessarily people that sign up to see our content. So it's a little bit different than using the other tactics that I just mentioned. So previously, we were doing kind of posts like this. We were doing about 5 posts per campaign. We would do a campaign on fun facts about Asian carps, and did you know they can be this old, or did you know that when they spawn, just little silly facts like that, but nothing really with a call to action. And we weren't getting the results we wanted. We were getting comments like, this isn't really helping me know what to do. So we shifted completely, and we've been doing taking a more targeted approach. How does this impact anglers or people that are out on the water? Can we give them better identification and more of a clear call to action? So that's what we've been doing. And we've also been doing a lot of video ads, which are doing really, really well. We did a grass carp or lookalike video. We produced our own video. And then again, we posted that DFO video. So the first and the last video there were produced by Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And we boosted these, so we paid to promote them. So this is kind of where you can see the difference in those campaigns. The beginning, like 6 or so, maybe 7 up to the economic impacts campaign were very cartoony and not super call to action based. And then the last ones were that shift. So you can see that our numbers have improved greatly. So how do you compare these tactics? It's definitely more expensive to run influencer marketing and paid ads in angler specific outlets. We get less impressions, but we're getting way more engagement. It's definitely more targeted and we're talking to more of a caring audience. These people sign up to read this content for a reason. They're interested in it. And the grass carp is something that would impact them. So they definitely are more positive and understanding of our messaging. Social media, we get way more impressions for what we spend, but it's less of a caring audience and less targeted in some ways. And we're also getting more negative comments on social media. So some of our lessons learned, just before I wrap up here, are content with grass carp photos or ID illustrations get way more engagement, including videos as well. Using influencer marketing and angler specific outlets are a great way to reach a very specific targeted audience. And shifting away from those multi-post campaigns that use those cartoony graphics and just posting standalone graphics or videos generate more impressions and get better engagement for us. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. And there's my contact info. If you have any questions, you can reach me there. But I'm also happy to take questions now.
Thanks for that, Rebecca. We have got quite a few questions coming in.
Perfect.
First question, is it possible to know what the name of the group in Quebec is that participates in the program for grass carp?
Yeah, so of the 9 partners, we work out of Quebec. We're working with and I will not say this in French, but it's, I guess, the equivalent to the MNR there in a way. It's the Quebec MFFP, which is like the Ministry of Flora, Fauna, and Parks, but in French. So the provincial government there is our partner on the collaborative.
Awesome, thanks. Another question. Your medium seems to cover a very wide range of demographics and audiences. The young anglers through Avery is particularly great. Any demographics you find particularly difficult to hit?
I think the older audience, we've been trying to kind of reach that like television. We did this a little bit with Gord, trying to see if maybe people from that, like, I don't know, maybe 60 plus group would follow Gord and read his posts. I don't know how like tech savvy that group is, so it's kind of hard to know if we're hitting them. But again, through these surveys, we're trying to figure that out. But like maybe more of those like early morning like TV shows, or maybe in those magazines is kind of a way we're hitting that group. But it's really hard to know for sure. But yeah.
Awesome. Another question. What types of negative comments do you see?
Well, it's more just like they're already here. Like, what's the point? What do you need me to do? Just like negative stuff. And like, again, we're popping up on these people's pages and they're not following us. They're not asking for this. So but again, like that's just like a small handful of people that are commenting that are negative. Like for the most part, we do get a lot of like likes and shares, and those are probably people that are more positive about what we're posting and like it and feel the need to share it. But we do get things like they're already here, you're wasting your time. The government, this is the US government's fault. Like they brought them here in the first place. Why does Canada have to deal with it? Just like things like that aren't really helpful.
Do you have much say in what the influencers, do you have much say in what the influencers produce for you?
Yeah, so we usually meet with them and just kind of say like, we really want to promote learning how to identify and reporting grass carp. And of course, like taking that impact piece in there is really important because we want their audience to understand why they should care and how it would impact them as anglers. So that's kind of what we say. And then we sort of put the ball back in their court to see how they feel that messaging can fit with them. And we've developed a like influencer kit, like a media kit, where we've just like disclosed some of the previous influencers we worked with, some of our materials, just to give them some ideas. But we kind of work together like really well. It's just, again, it's kind of how does this fit with your branding and what do you think would work best with your social media channels? And we approve of everything that they post before they do, just to make sure that the information is accurate. But yeah.
And can you talk a bit about how you identify which influencers you want to work with?
Yeah, so the gap analysis that I mentioned really briefly had kind of just like a starting point, gave us a bunch of ideas. And then from there, we've used that survey and the results there where people kind of gave us some ideas of who they follow, where they like to get their information. And then, Liana, you have given us like a lot of help because you're an angler yourself. So you know some of these people and you follow them. So you've given us a couple. Yeah, those are kind of the 3 ways I would say.
And we'll do one more question just for the sake of time. How are you measuring the success of your influencer marketing?
Yeah, so they give us metrics at the end of every campaign. So they'll tell us how many impressions they got. It's kind of like a little final report, I guess, for the campaign. So we can compare like cost per impression if we wanted across all of them. But mostly what I'm looking for with the influencers is just the engagement. Like, did they get a lot of positive feedback? Did their followers find the information useful? Like what comments were they getting? And I guess we also see that in terms of like shares and likes to their posts and stuff like that. So that's the most important thing to me, is if people are actually engaging with it.
Well, thank you very much, Rebecca, for your presentation and for answering all those questions. If you have some time, if you're able to maybe go into the Q&A and get to some of the answer or some of the questions that I wasn't able to read. And yeah, thanks again.
Awesome.
With that, I would like to introduce our next speaker and our final speaker for the session this morning, Paige Kuczmarski from the Alberta Invasive Species Council.
Hey. Great. Can we all see this? I hope. So as Liana said, I'm Paige. I'll be talking about our little grant that we got from the Invasive Species Center, and we titled the project "To Be a Champion, You Must Report Like a Champion." So we were engaging community champions in invasive species identification and reporting. So just a little outline. I'll kind of introduce the Alberta Invasive Species Council, a little bit about EDMAPS, and then our partnership with the Invasive Species Center. So the job of the Alberta Invasive Species Council, I'll just go with AISC for now, is to educate people and make them aware of invasive species, how to prevent their introduction and stop the spread in and around Alberta. It was established as a nonprofit society in 2006. So we were initially called the Alberta Invasive Plant Council, and the name was changed in 2013 to reflect a broader scope and to include all invasive species taxa. As a nonprofit, we have a board of directors. There's about 14 right now, I believe, and 2 full-time staff. So I am one of 2 staff. We receive our funding from a variety of sources, such as grants, sponsorships, and donations. An example of that funding would be the project I'll be going over. Our vision for the council is prevention-inspired, Alberta protected. So we provide leadership on invasive species management by increasing awareness. We serve as a respected source for credible information with our fact sheets, and we empower Albertans to protect, detect, and take action against invasive species. So with that kind of vision in mind, we have a fairly new website located there on the screen. We have over 150 fact sheets for legislated species in the province, and that's kind of how we got our claim to fame. We send out a quarterly newsletter. You can sign up there with the QR code in blue. We did a major revision to the Alberta Weed ID guide. So that was front to back. We just got it printed last summer, and they've been kind of flying off the shelves. So those are awesome. We host an annual conference. This year will be our 10th one, coming up on March 7th and 8th in Olds, Alberta. So if you're in the area, definitely register and come join us. That QR code is also on the screen. We run the biocontrol release program for the province. I go out every summer and release different agents to different invasive plants to control those populations. And we support several campaigns that educate the public about invasive species. Some of these you've definitely seen before and have already been mentioned today, but I'll just do a quick run through. So buy local, burn local, don't move firewood, can spread invasive insects and tree diseases. We have Don't Let It Loose, which is a nationwide initiative to remind individuals not to dump their pet aquariums into the wild. Certified Weed-Free Forage, which is a program that we're trying to kind of revitalize in the province. So basically producers get their fields inspected for invasives and inspectors will certify that forage for market. There's classic Grow Me Instead or Be Plant-Wise, where gardeners have suggested alternatives to common invasive species found. We also have Clean Drain Dry, another common one you'll see at the borders. This ensures that people are clean drain and drying their gear before moving between water bodies. Play Clean Go, North American campaign to stop invasive species in your tracks. So it's similar to Clean Drain Dry, but this applies to any outdoor activity. Rock climbing, biking, kind of you name it, that's under that umbrella there. More and more provinces are adopting the Squeal and Pigs campaign, as wild boar at large are one of the most invasive species in North America, and we have a healthy population in the Canadian prairies. This campaign was shared from Montana, and it's kind of just a fun way for people to remember to squeal or report wild boar to authorities, since hunting is not a viable control option. And last but not least, we have EDMAPS and EDMAPS Pro. So this stands for Early Detection and Distribution Mapping System. It's a free invasive species reporting app and website. So anyone and everyone can use it to map, track, and report invasives. We also have EDMAPS Pro, which follows the same kind of premises. It's free too, and is used for professionals and invasive species managers to be able to go back in and manage and control and record data of repeated visits and high priority infestations. So the AISC has had success with introducing this campaign into Alberta, originally as EDMAPS Alberta, as you can see on the little app there. But this app is across North America. So in 2021, they went national and changed it to just plain old EDMAPS as one name, as it's the same resource across the board, but there's several names in the States and even I think in Canada too. So in Alberta, it's been used to assist managers with mapping and controlling invasive species. It's also been a great tool for increasing public awareness of invasive species. So as we mentioned, it's free to use and definitely beats carrying around a heavy identification guide with you when you have your phone with you anyways. So you can download that here if you're interested. If you open it up, you'll see something like this, the screenshots on here. You can add positive sightings as well as negative sightings, which we've been using for mussels. We are still mussel free. So you can choose whatever species category that you fall in as well for your report. We added a new feature that I don't think I included in the screenshot here, but it's an invasive plant key. So it's basically just a picture of a plant. If you're out in the field and you see something with blue flowers, it'll give us options of possible invasives we have with photos, legislations, information about it, everything. So that has been super handy and definitely just replaces an identification guide. You can report an invasive. You just basically fill in the blanks, this very far right photo there. And your report is actually sent into expert verifiers in the province that will verify your species and send it to local authorities to go out and actually control it. So I would download that, absolutely. But after hearing about this, kind of what does EDMAPS, the AISC, and ISC all have to do with each other? So besides the obvious of invasive species, the ISC and AISC do a lot of outreach. So this go around, the ISC had received some funding with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to increase awareness and outreach of priority aquatic invasive species that have impacts on species at risk. And since Alberta has an issue with goldfish releases, pretty sure to date there's over 100 locations in the province just from intentional releases. So we were the perfect partnership waiting to happen, and EdMaps was kind of the key to it all. So we wanted to try out different ways to increase awareness of aquatic invasive species and reach new audiences. And our plan was to engage community champions to use EdMaps to identify and report invasives through social media posts, contests, and a radio ad. So we had a few deliverables and achieved some great results in a short window. I think it was about 3 months. So let's see. First, we created an aquatic invasive species of the month and an infographic for crayfish. So with the species of the month, we focused 3 posts for identification of key aquatic invasives in Alberta. So unfortunately, we have all 3 of these species in the province, and locations keep increasing. So the plan was to highlight flowering rush, goldfish, and Prussian carp. And I'm not sure if you can make out the post itself here, but our style with our outreach is using kind of fun puns. It just kind of describes sometimes scientific or wordy topics to more relatable and easy to understand. So that's our kind of style. We posted these from January to March in the beginning of 2022. As well, part of that deliverable was a crayfish infograph. Since there's a few species we want to be on the lookout for. So northern crayfish is one of the ones on that page there. It's actually native to Alberta in the Beaver River watershed, but it's been moved intentionally to different areas in the province and of course has become invasive. So the 3 other species here are of concern to us, closely related and present similar impacts if they became established. So we wanted to give a little bit of identification for these species to prevent possible introductions and highlight their identification. So to tag along as well with the species of the month, we plan to boost the posts on our 3 social media accounts. So Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To reach just additional people and new audiences, since as was mentioned, you can customize boosting with people's interests, their age range, and specific location. I think there's a couple other categories, but those are the big boys. We boosted the 3 posts and 2 videos that were previously made with Michael Short from Let's Go Outdoors. So one was a 6-minute long video and the other was a quick 30-second kind of commercial. We kind of noticed that anything really over a minute long is less likely to keep the interest of a viewer of the viewer. So a short video is kind of the way to go if that's your target. Then for the 3 species of the month posts, the flying rush one was actually our most well received across all platforms. So we had comments on all of the posts and lots of engagement, which was great. So they kind of range from great to have this warning, or just kind of opposite. So maybe these can be planted in tar sand tailing ponds. You can kind of see a couple above there on the screen. However, we kind of thought that any interaction is really a positive one because it means that individuals are reading and understanding the impacts and the risk associated with these species. So we didn't have any direct outreach with influencers or anything like that, or specific targeted audiences, besides just those brief categories of age range and interest. But especially for topics like Don't Let It Loose, where these releases are usually intentional, we kind of thought that this audience of just anyone walking down the street was a better option than specifically reaching out to people that are interested and in the know for those kind of topics. So for these posts, we were able to reach up to 52,000 individuals. We had lots of different shares ranging from 2 shares to 260 shares, lots of likes, and over 400 new followers combined across all of our 3 platforms.
Paige, you have about 2 minutes left.
Excellent. Another idea we had was to increase the user drive through contests. So we had a random draw one for individuals to just download the app. We had a total of 650 locations submitted and 190 downloads. And then a second one we had during family fishing weekend, just a little scavenger hunt. That one received no reports through it, but we had significant prizes for both contests. So we were not too sure why that was, maybe because EdMaps requires a little bit of explanation after downloading. So maybe that was the reasoning. We also did a new one for AISC, which was radio advertising. We had a little script for Don't Let It Loose and focused on that. And we actually posted this ad in English and Cree. I was going to play it for you, but we don't have time here. So that was pretty cool. I can send it around in the chat too after if that works as well. Oh, there it was. And then finally, we wanted to reach out to the angling community with our family fishing weekend that Alberta hosts every year. And that was specific with that scavenger hunt contest. So kind of kill two birds with one stone. We had really good outreach reach with it, but not a lot of submissions to the actual contest. But just to quickly wrap it up, I don't want to go over time. Overall, to be a champion, you must report like a champion. So engaging these community champions in invasive species ID and reporting is really no small feat and requires different outreach for different audiences or new and engaging ways to reach out. We were able to dip our toes into kind of a variety of ways, and had success and definitely lessons learned. So we had the amazing opportunity to partner and collaborate with the ISC to make those things happen, and we're really grateful for that. I just wanted to thank them again for reaching out to us and continuing our partnership, and inviting us to speak at the forum here. And thanks for listening. So if you have any questions, let me know, and you can keep in touch with us through our social media platforms.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Paige. I'm going to go off and read some questions.
Okay.
And if anyone, again, has any questions, type them into the Q&A chat box, please. So first question, which inspectors are responsible for inspecting the forage before sale? And do they work with labs to identify any weed seeds found? If so, do you know which labs?
The labs, I'm not sure, but for the inspectors, so the province has certified weed inspectors, and they are the only ones that are allowed to be certified weed-free forage inspectors. So they go through extensive training to be able to identify species to begin with, and then for the weed-free forage program, there's NASMA standards, so the North American Invasive Species Association has a set list of weeds across North America that they check for within the forage. And then each province or state can add their own individual species as well. For the forage to be certified, it has to have no propagative plants. So no seeds, no root fragments, flowering heads, anything like that. So for seed specific, I'm not sure.
Next question, did you consult local Indigenous communities for the development of the Wind Speaker campaign?
We did not, actually. We just worked with the Wind Speaker radio and asked them what language would go over well on their station. And they said Cree was the top one. We got a few responses from them, and definitely more than the English version that was out on the same channel. So we still had engagement, which was awesome.
Thanks. Do you find paid boosting to result in a lot of unrelated / uninformed engagement? Any tips on how to deal with this?
Yeah, definitely. But like I mentioned, I feel like kind of any engagement is still getting that messaging out there. In regards to kind of filtering it, I would just try and put as much information as you could on the post. I know it's definitely better to have like short and sweet, get what you want out there, as well as like a call to action and what needs to be done. But people do what they want, so it's hard to control that.
What about using iNaturalist as well?
So I actually am not super familiar with it. I do not have it. I probably should, just for even just comparison's sake. So I'm not sure. I find that EdMaps is really easy to use. I obviously know too much about it, but it's very specific to invasive species. I feel like iNaturalist has some natives included as well. So maybe that would be my comment. This one is just completely invasive species. Yeah.
In response to the goldfish problem in Alberta, do you work with or support any pet surrender / take back events?
No events. That would be awesome to do. Last year, we tried to pilot a pet store recognition program. So we worked with 10 different kind of ma and pa stores around the province and just gave them information. We tried to train their staff to commit to explaining don't let it loose materials when people were purchasing fish, if they were interested in them. And we're hoping to expand that into something like a take back program, or working with those stores to make sure that they will take it back. The ones that we worked with have all agreed to say like, yes, we will if someone was to surrender. But we're hoping to expand that, and an event would be a great idea. All ears.
Great, thanks. And that's all we have time for this morning. So I'm going to direct any other questions to Paige's email in the chat. I believe it's in there. And I'm going to touch on a quick some info about our community science before we head for break. So with that, I'd like to thank Paige for your presentation and for answering the questions.
Yeah, thank you. Take care, guys.
Before we move to a quick break, I would like to touch on our community science program. This community science program aims to connect all of our ISC and partner opportunities and resources in one handy spot, so you can connect to the initiatives that interest you the most. It's as simple as joining, learning, and taking action through one of the many ongoing community science initiatives. You can visit our website to learn more. And with that, I would like to pass it to Mackenzie.
Thank you, Liana. And thanks to all of our speakers for this first session of the morning. We're going to take a 10-minute break here and reconvene at 10:30. I hope you guys can get your bathroom breaks and your coffee in and ready for our next session. So we'll see you back in about 9 or 10 minutes. For our next session, more on aquatic invasive species, we're going to talk about knowing your audience. So we'll see you in a few minutes.